Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om 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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Seveya Bhagavat Utama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, entitled Answers by Citing the Lord's Version. We're on Text 9 of Chapter 9, Canto 2, Text 9. And today is March 7th, 2021. So Text 9 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 9, Canto 2. Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita Siddharshayam Asa Param Na Yat Param Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam Svadrishtavadbi Purushai Abhishtutam Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita Sandarshayamasa Param Nayat Param Sandarshayamasa Param Nayat Param Yapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam Yapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam Svadrishtavadbir Pusher Abhishtutam Svadrishtavadbir Pusher Abhishtutam Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita Sandarshayamasa Param Nayat Param Sandarshayamasa Param Nayat Param Vyapeta Sankle Shavimoha Sadvasam Vyapeta Sankle Shavimoha Sadvasam Svatrishtavadbir Pusher Abhishtutam Svatrishtavadbir Pusher Abhishtutam Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita Sandarshayamasa Param Nayat Param Sandarshayamasa Param Nayat Param Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam Svadrishtavadbir Pusher Abhishtutam Svadrishtavadbir Pusher Abhishtutam. But then, yes, anyone else like to chant the verse?
Tasmai Swalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita
Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita
Sandarshamasa Param Nayat Param
Sandarshayamasa Param Nayat Param
Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam
Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam
Swadrishtavadvir Purusher Avishtutam
Svadrishtavadbir Pusher Abhishtutam.
Tasmai Swalokam Bhagavam Savajita.
Tasmai Swalokam Bhagavan Savashita.
Saudarshayam Asaparam Nayaparam.
Sandarshayama Saparam Nayatparam.
Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sarvasam.
Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sarvasam.
Swadristavadvir Purusheravistutam.
Swadrishtabadvi Purushera Vishtutam.
Tasmai Swalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita.
Swalokam Bhagavam Savajita.
Sadarshayam Masa Param Nayat Param.
Sadarshayam Asaparam Nayatparam.
Yapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam.
Yapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam.
Smadrishtavadbir Pusher Abhistutam.
Swadristavadvir Purushera Vishtutam.
Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita.
Tasmai Swalokam Bhagavan Savachita.
Sandarshayama Param Nayat Param.
Sandarshayama Saparam Nayatparam.
Yapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam.
Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sabhasam.
Swadrishtavadvir Purusher Avishtutam.
Swadrishtavadvir Purushe Avishtutam.
Okay, we'll go to the word for word. This is text 9, chapter 9, canto 2, Srimad Bhagavatam. Tasmai,
Tasmai,
unto him,
unto him,
Svalokam,
Swalokam,
his own planet or abode.
his own planet or abode,
Bhagavan,
Bhagavan,
the personality of Godhead.
the personality of Godhead,
Sabhajita,
Sabhajita,
being pleased by the penance of Brahma.
being pleased by the penance of Brahma,
Sandarshayam Asa,
Sandarshayam Asam,
manifested.
manifested,
Param,
Param,
the supreme.
the supreme,
Na,
Na,
not,
not,
Yat,
Yat,
of which.
of which,
Param,
Param,
further supreme.
further supreme,
Vyapeta,
Vyapyeta,
completely given up.
completely given up,
Sanklesha,
Sanklesha,
5 kinds of material afflictions.
5 kinds of material afflictions,
Vimoha,
Vimoha,
without illusion.
without illusion,
Sadvasam,
Satvasam,
fear of material existence.
fear of material existence,
Svadrishtavadbi,
Svadrishavadvi,
by those who have perfectly realized the self.
by those who have perfectly realized the self,
Purushai,
Purushai,
5 persons.
5 persons,
Abhishtutam,
Abhishtutam,
worshipped by.
worshipped by.
Translation. The personality of Godhead, being thus very much satisfied with the penance of Lord Brahma, was pleased to manifest his personal abode, Vaikuntha, the supreme planet above all others. This transcendental abode of the Lord is adored by all self-realized persons, freed from all kinds of miseries and fear of illusory existence. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The troubles of penance accepted by Lord Brahma were certainly in the line of devotional service, bhakti. Otherwise, there was no chance that Vaikuntha or Svalokam, the Lord's personal abodes, would become visible to Brahmaji. The personal abodes of the Lord, known as Vaikunthas, are neither mythical nor material, as conceived by the impersonalist, but realization of the transcendental abodes of the Lord is possible only through devotional service, and thus the devotees enter into such abodes. There is undoubtedly trouble in executing penance, but the trouble accepted in executing bhakti yoga is transcendental happiness from the very beginning, whereas the trouble of penance in other processes of self-realization, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, etc., without any Vaikuntha realization, ends in trouble only and nothing more. There is no profit in beating husks without grains. Similarly, there is no profit in executing troublesome penances other than bhakti yoga for self-realization. Executing bhakti yoga is exactly like sitting on the lotus sprouted out of the abdomen of the transcendental personality of Godhead. For Lord Brahma was seated there. Brahmaji was able to please the Lord, and the Lord was also pleased to show Brahmaji his personal abode. Srila Jiva Goswami, in his commentary on Srila Jiva Goswami, in the comments of his Krama Sandarbha annotation of Srimad Bhagavatam, cites quotations from the Garga Upanishad Vedic evidence. It is said that Yajnavalkya described the transcendental abode of the Lord to Gargi, and that the abode of the Lord is situated above the highest planet of the universe, namely Brahmaloka. This abode of the Lord, although described in revealed scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, remains only a myth for the less intelligent class of men with a poor fund of knowledge. Herein, the word svadrishtavad is very significant. One who has actually realized his self realizes the transcendental form of oneself. Impersonal realization of self in the Supreme is not complete because it is just an opposite conception of material personalities. The personality of Godhead and the personalities of devotees of the Lord are all transcendental. They do not have material bodies. The material body is overcast with 5 kinds of miserable conditions, namely ignorance, material conception, attachment, hatred, and absorption. As long as one is overwhelmed by those 5 kinds of material miseries, there is no question of entering into the Vaikuntha Lokas. The impersonal conception of oneself is just the negation of material personality and is far from the positive existence of personal form. The personal forms of the transcendental abode will be explained in the following verses. Brahmaji also described the highest planet of the Vaikuntha Loka as Goloka Vrindavan, where the Lord resides as a cowherd boy, keeping transcendental Sarabi cows and surrounded by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune. Chintamani prakarasat masu kalpa vriksha laksha viteshu surabhira vipalayantam Lakshmi sahasrasata sambrahma sevyamanam govindamadi pusham tamaham bhajami. That's the Brahma Samhita, 5th chapter, 29th verse. The statement of the Bhagavad Gita, Yadgat Fanani Vartante Tadama Parama Mama, is also confirmed herewith. Param means transcendental Brahman. Therefore, the abode of the Lord is also Brahman, non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is known as Vaikuntha, and his abode is also known as Vaikuntha. Such Vaikuntha realization and worship can be made possible by transcendental form and sense. Om Ganatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayamrupa Kadamayam Darati Swapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapradakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tayubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 9. Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita Sandarshayama Saparam Nayat Param Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam Swadrishtavadbir Purushera. The personality of Godhead, being very much satisfied with the penance of Lord Brahma, was pleased to manifest his personal abode, Vaikuntha, the supreme planet above all others. This transcendental abode of the Lord is adored by all self-realized persons, freed from all kinds of miseries and fear of illusory existence. Hare Krishna. Okay. Yeah. So Prabhupada references a verse from the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Natad basai te suryo napavakana shashanka yadgadfana divartante tadama parama mama. And there Krishna gives a glimpse into the spiritual realm, the Vaikuntha planets, Goloka Vrindavan, and just a glimpse. And then as a general principle, Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural extension or follow-up to Bhagavad Gita. And so whatever Bhagavad Gita explains, Bhagavatam goes into it much more thoroughly. So here in this part of Bhagavatam and many other parts of Bhagavatam, there's extensive descriptions of the Vaikuntha planets. The whole 10th canto is descriptions of Vaikuntha planets, Dwarka, Goloka Vrindavan. And so we get windows into the spiritual world here. In the purport, in Prabhupada's purport to that verse in Bhagavad Gita 15.6, Prabhupada writes, one should be captivated by this information. So like we hear his urgency, his compassion. So it's like a travel brochure, right? Just like here, yes, come, travel brochure for Paris or London or visit Bombay, and we have advertisements and travel. So this is here, and then the next several verses. Then in Canto 3, there's extensive descriptions and all throughout Bhagavatam. So it's like a travel brochure, and Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and the Acharyas, and Shukadev Goswami, they're like imploring us, develop a desire to go there, develop a desire to make that your destination. So a whole theme in these verses is Brahma's penance. He heard the word tapa, which means austerity, penance. And a point we've made frequently, recent days and weeks, is everyone's doing austerity. Everyone's struggling, okay? I've not yet met someone who's not struggling. So everyone's struggling. So then what's a worthwhile struggle? What's the goal of our struggle, right? So everyone's struggling. And then, and then if our struggle is essentially and ultimately for nothing, then that's cause for suicidal depression, really. So everyone's struggling. Everyone's doing austerity. We've discussed this point many, many times. We do austerity to get a degree. We do austerity to earn money. We do austerity to communicate effectively. I just want to say this and that, but I'm going to listen first. It's an austerity. It's an austerity of the mind. It's an austerity of speech. I'll choose my words carefully. So there's austerities around all parts of life. and everyone's doing austerity. So then what's the goal of our austerity? Okay. What's the goal of our struggle? So here, the encouragement is make your goal the Vaikuntha planets, or you might call it even more, the topmost Vaikuntha planet, Goloka Vrindavan. But we'll do, Vaikuntha means that place without anxiety. It's the name of the spiritual planets. And the name for Krishna is Vaikuntha. Krishna is Vaikuntanath, the director, the Lord of Vaikuntha, and Krishna is Vaikuntha. That to the extent we take shelter, there's that analogy many of you know from the courses or other places, like the jaws of the cat represent death. The jaws of the cat represent death. And so to the extent that our struggle is not for self-realization and Vaikuntha, bhakti, because Prabhupada starts here, the troubles of penance accepted by Lord Brahma were certainly in the line of devotional service, bhakti. So to the extent that our struggles are not for bhakti, then death, old age, disease, they're like the jaws of the cat experienced by the rat or the mouse. And to the extent that we give our life to that value which is enduring, Shudyad Yasmad Brahmasukyam Tvanantam, for that ever expanding spiritual bliss that comes from bhakti, then the jaws of the cat, death, are like the kitten's experience of the jaws of the cat, warm, sheltering, secure, loving. So so the encouragement is, make your goal that aim, that goal, make your goal. This is we're at free choice. Make your goal, that aim, which will never be crushed by time, which will never be destroyed by time. We're eternal beings. We won't be satisfied with any temporary so-called pleasures. Right, so this is the encouragement. We're going to struggle. We're going to have suffering. We're going to have austerity, penance. So what's the goal of it? What's the goal of it? And to the extent that our goal is something that's not eternal, then a lot of our time is spent numbing the existential despair that goes along with that. Trying to escape from that existential despair. So this whole description here, next several verses, beautiful, beautiful descriptions. And whatever we understand or don't understand, simply by exposing ourselves to the sound vibration, these windows to the spiritual world, we get purified. We experience purification. So this is unique to Vaishnavism. Sure, there are other places where the idea is the kingdom of heaven. Of course, here in Vaishnavism, there's in Bhagavatam, in the cosmology, there's a distinction between heaven, which are upper material planets, and Vaikuntha, which are truly spiritual planets. I don't know if we'll get so much into the distinction today, but it's a big distinction, okay? Because the material heavenly planets, Kshine Punye, Mochilokam Vishanti, one still needs, there's piety and there's a lot of enjoyment, but one still is in the cycle of birth and death within the sojourn of material existence. So there are other places, the kingdom of God, okay? And when I say this is unique, there's extensive descriptions of the activities, of the form, of the color, of the personality in the kingdom of God. Extensive descriptions that's found nowhere else. Now someone can say, well, I don't believe this. Okay, what we're saying here is such extensive descriptions of what's happening, in that place without anxiety. Kunta means anxiety. Vaikuntha means place without anxiety. ihayasya harirdasya karmana manasagira nichilasvapyavastasu jivan muktasa uchyate. And we can experience that Vaikuntha atmosphere while we're in this body. We don't need to wait and for this body to die. By engaging in bhakti, like Brahma's doing, then we experience Vaikuntha, and the spiritual world begins to open up to us. So this gets to the question of what is the source, what's the fountainhead, what's the substratum of existence itself. Maybe most people don't think about it, but our actions are determined by our conscious or unconscious understanding about that. So is the goal to accumulate material toys? Is materialism the goal? Then at some point, people get the idea, well, yeah, that's not really satisfying. It's not really satisfying. Okay, so I quoted one comedian sometimes, trying to be satisfied by material acquisitions is like trying to satisfy hunger by taping sandwiches all over your body. Okay. So it just stays external. It's not gonna touch the soul. Okay. So then, okay, well, I'm sorry I just put that image in your mind, but that's the way I thought to be impactful. Now that image is with you at least for the whole day. Sorry about that, but there it is. Okay, so then some philosophies are, yes, don't indulge in materialism. It's a futile existence. As Shakespeare, someone in Macbeth said, life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So each word of that poetry just gets bleaker and bleaker, right? So that's materialism, signifying, okay, there's full of sound and fury, but at the end, there's just nothing. All right, so then there's some philosophies that goes, okay, well, at the core, just accept it, there's nothing. At the core, there's voidism. That's why when we honor Prabhupada, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavad Paschache Desha Tarine. Shunyavad, nothingness, voidism. So Prabhupada came to the West to give us personalism, to expose the incompleteness and the tragedy of voidist philosophies, which are common. Many approaches to Buddhism. Of course, the Buddha is an avatar, but he had particular. So we honor the Buddha as an avatar of Krishna, and we don't follow most of the philosophy. Good parts of the philosophy are that we're not the body, so that can be helpful. Sure. And then, most of modern materialistic empirical science is voidism at the core. So is that our goal? What's the goal of our austerity? Because we're all struggling, we're all suffering. Anyone I've ever met in my 60 years. Okay. So, and the goal is that ultimately I realize that nothing is the source. Okay. I don't get excited about that. Okay. And it doesn't make logical sense. And then then at the source, it's not matter, not nothing. It's the undifferentiated spiritual white light. Okay, there's many approaches that's the focus, undifferentiated spiritual white light. So Prabhupada and Bhagavatam, they're making the point that, okay, that's an incomplete conception. So Bhagavatam starts with, and we focused on this on our Switzerland Association 8 days ago, right? First verse of Bhagavatam, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so Vasudev is the name of Krishna, and Vasudev means the all-pervading person, right? So that's inconceivable. Doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. It means to my limited, because person means Here's a person occupying, 2 square feet of space and of a certain height and person. So Krishna, Vasudeva, is a person that's all pervading. Antarasta, Paramana Chantarasta. Krishna exists. Vasudeva, Krishna, Vasudeva is the name of Krishna. That means a person that exists in every atom, in the heart of all living entities. Ishvara Sarvabhutanam, Videsha Arjuna Tishtati. Okay. So this is the substratum of existence. Transphenomenal, transcendental personhood. This is the substratum of existence. And this is the goal of the Vaishnava. This is the goal of the bhakti yogi. Not just I do bhakti to eventually be relieved of material existence and merge into the nothingness or merge into the undifferentiated world. No, the very foundation. Well, first of all, there is no nothingness. Okay, so there's no void anywhere in the universe. That's Bhagavatam cosmology. There is the white light. That is an aspect of God realization. Nothingness is not. Of course, the conception of nothingness can be helpful. That yes, I'm not that. I am nothing material. God is nothing material. Okay, but negation of matter is not in itself spiritual. It can be a foundation. So Janmadhyasya, so the substratum of existence, the foundation, the fountainhead, the source of existence is transcendental personhood, a transcendental person, Vasudeva, Sri Krishna. Okay. And then Bhagavatam goes on in the first verse, Janmadhyasya ton vayadi turitash chardesh vabigeshu svara teni brahma vidya dikavi yantiyat sura. So Janmadhyasya yataha. So from that source, from that transcognitive, when I say transcendental, means it includes what we can conceive and it transcends it. It includes and transcends it. And the way we can enter into that which is inconceivable to our mundane mind and senses is through devotion, loving service. Just like the way we get to know a conscious human being is not to try to force them to reveal themselves to us, but by pleasing them, by gaining love and trust, then you choose to reveal yourself to me. So that's the way to know a conscious entity. So that's the way to know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why the emphasis here is Krishna, Vasudeva, revealed his own abode, his intimate self to Brahma, because he was pleased with Brahma's bhakti. Bhaktosime sakacheti rahasyam yetaduttamam. Krishna revealed the open secret of Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Why? Not because Arjuna was the greatest scholar of the time, but he says to Arjuna, because you're my devotee and you're my friend. Okay, so transcendental personhood is the foundation of all existence. This is very unique. This is very unique here in Bhagavatam, and it makes logical sense. It makes logical sense to grasp what it's like. Just like if there's a shadow, we can understand there's something substantial, right? If we see the shadow of a tree, it does make logical sense that there's an actual substantial tree. So this world, this is like the shadow world, the material world. Not that it doesn't exist, it just doesn't have substance. It doesn't have substance. It exists as a reflection. And so everything in the reflection exists in its substantial form in the origin, right? So just like, well, in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes the banyan tree, that brilliant banyan tree metaphor, right? He goes, so there's a tree with its branches down and its roots up. Where do we see a tree with its branches down and its roots up? Okay, if we're looking across a river, and on the other side of the river, there's a big tree, big banyan tree, then the reflection, the branches are down, the roots are up. So the reflection is real and it lacks substance. Like, let's say there's fruits, there's figs or oranges or whatever. There's fruits on the actual tree. So then if we go into the water and try to get a fruit, again, the reflection has reality like a shadow has reality. A shadow is dependent on the actual substance, and the actual substance is not affected by the shadow. Okay. So this world's like we're trying to get fruits that have no substance. That is in that sense, it's false. And so there are many philosophies. Even we can read many poets or rock and roll lyricists who have an intellectual side, and they realize the falsity, the illusory nature of material existence. It's a pretty common realization. Okay, but what is the positive? But okay, so yeah, this reflection on the water, this shadow, this isn't the real thing. This isn't real life. True, right, good. So then what is real form? What is the substantial personality? There is a real tree, and we get extensive descriptions, extensive process to enter into the actual tree and enjoy the actual fruits from Srimad Bhagavatam. And the nature, because it's just like, okay, there's 180 degrees of, let's say, the reflection, but then there's that other 180 degrees in the circle. That's the real thing. Janmadhyasa yataha, whatever exists in the effect must exist in the source. We have personality, we have form. Within this shadow reality, there's music, there's dancing, there's food, there's personality. So that it must exist in its original form in the actual tree. So the original form, so it's just like here, everything is a source of temporary, full of misery and ignorance. So everything in the spiritual realm is such Chidananda Vigraha, form, personality, eternity, knowledge, bliss. Okay, so it's form, it's quality, it's associates, it's color, it's music, it's dancing of a different quality. And we get to taste that quality by performing bhakti yoga under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master in this body. Just like, okay, so like Mother Yashoda, most of you are probably familiar with this pastime, she looks in Krishna's mouth because she heard from the cowherd boys and Balaram that Krishna ate dirt, so she doesn't want him to get sick, right? So now Krishna, he's within Vrindavan. And of course, so he's within the material universe. He's within Vrindavan. So then Mother Yashoda looks in his mouth, because Krishna says, okay, look, you can check for yourself. Okay. So Mother Yashoda looks in his mouth, and then she sees within Krishna's mouth the entire universe, all the universes. Okay, so Krishna is within Vrindavan, but then Vrindavan and the entire universe, and even Mother Yashoda herself in an infinite regress is seeing herself in Krishna's mouth. Okay, so she's thinking, oh, maybe this is Maya. Maybe I'm under the force of illusion here. Maybe I'm under the force of illusion here. But she's not. No, she was under the force of illusion when she wanted to make sure Krishna doesn't get sick. Right? She's thinking Krishna is her little boy. She's not realizing who he is. So that's illusion. Now that's spiritual Maya. It's called Yoga Maya. It's not like our illusion that takes us further and further away from self-realization and devotional service to God. And she's thinking maybe she has some dementia. She was thinking like that. Maybe something's gone on with me. but that's not true. Maybe the demigods are playing a trick. No, that's not true. Then she said, maybe Krishna actually has this amazing mystic power. And now she's realizing truth. That's true. Okay. So then Krishna put her back into Yoga Maya because he didn't want her to start thinking of him as this mystic giant or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the principle here, so Krishna has a form, and Krishna is a form, and the form is non-different from Krishna. And that's true for us too, as we revive and reclaim and manifest our spiritual bodies through the process of bhakti yoga. And it's a form of a completely different quality. It's a form of a completely different quality. So with logic, we can understand that what exists in the effect must exist in the source, form, color. And an example we sometimes use, as we get from Srila Prabhupada, so you believe that God is blue? Yes? Well, that's a very primitive conception. Now, what is that blue? I know that it's not the blue I see on the pillow cushions with these eyes, right? But it's Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Shantasha Deva Vidayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundarama Chincha Gunasa Rupam Govinda Mari Pujam Tamaham Bhajami. Lord Brahma Samhita, he prays to Govinda. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shama Sundar, Krishna himself, filled with innumerable transcendental attributes, in whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eyes of devotion, tinged with the salve of love. So the soul has eyes, and those eyes awaken as we develop the salve of love. And so with our spiritual eyes, then we see what that blue is, what that trans-empirical blue is. With our ears, as we train our ears by hearing the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, by hearing Bhagavatam, then we hear what is the sound of Krishna's flute, what's the sound of Vaikuntha. So again, everyone's struggling, and we get to look at, to what extent are my austerities pain, penance? To what extent are they in the line of Brahma, as Prabhupada says here? That Brahma's troubles were certainly in the line of devotional service. And then it's like, oh, okay, I'm entering into this doorway, into Vaikuntha, into this place without anxiety. This is a worthwhile struggle. Otherwise, it's suffering, it's struggle, and it's futile. So we practice this process of bhakti under the guidance of someone who's a Vaikuntha man, or a Vaikuntha woman, meaning someone who's living steadily in this Vaikuntha atmosphere. And we're going to hear more and more about, we're going to get descriptions of this Vaikuntha place and the personalities there. And so, yeah, so it's not like we need to be completely realized in the spiritual world in order to recognize a Vaikuntha person. But we need to have enough sincerity and intelligence, to be able to recognize. Okay, so in one sense, that part of it, it's taken care of for us if we want it to be. Srila Prabhupada is a Vaikuntha man, and we get to follow Srila Prabhupada. And so the examples, like if we want to buy gold, I don't need to have a PhD in geology. I don't need to be an expert in mineralogy to buy gold, but I need to have enough sincerity and intelligence that, like, I'm not just going to go to the mechanic shop I have $20,000. Can you give me some gold? And they give me an iron wrench. Okay, yeah, this is 20,000. Thank you, sir. And like that. I go to the to the men's clothes shop. I have another 10,000. Here's a tie. Thank you. So these are ridiculous examples, but that's the point. Because for actual spirit, everyone's looking for that Vaikuntha bliss, and to go and for spiritual life, there's mandas prayene parsha sabya kalavasmi nugajana manda sumanda matu manda badru upadruta. That's a verse from the first chapter of Bhagavatam, where Bhagavatam describes, Sutta Goswami describes, that people in this age tend to be lazy, slow, quarrel over trifles, and then the point is made that, and even if someone does become sincere about spiritual life, they're likely to be cheated by charlatans and cheaters in the name of spiritual life. And it's the same thing, like, oh, I'll give you my heart and soul, and then they get an iron wrench and they're thinking it's gold. So we need to have enough sincerity and intelligence to know where to go to get gold. Srila Prabhupada is the source. He's giving us the matchless gift of this Vaikuntha experience. And the more we hear and chant, the more we uncover and reveal our original spiritual senses, and we get to enter into these windows into the spiritual world. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 9. Tasmai Svalokam Bhagavan Sabhajita Sandarshayama Saparam Nayat Param Vyapeta Sanklesha Vimoha Sadvasam Swadrishtavadbir Pushera Bishtutam. The personality of Godhead, being very much satisfied with the penance of Lord Brahma, was pleased to manifest his personal abode, Vaikuntha, the supreme planet above all others. This transcendental abode of the Lord is adored by all self-realized persons, freed from all kinds of miseries and fear of illusory existence. Thank you for your attention. Hare Krishna. I welcome any comments or questions.
Hare Krishna. I really appreciate the analogy, or the visual description of the reflection of the tree. I've never understood that analogy, so I'm really glad for the way that you described it. And my question goes, so you said everything in the reflection is there in the original source. And so how can I understand things like, I don't know, murder or disease or rape or feces? Like, how does that exist in the source? What does that mean?
Okay, yeah, all right. So, yeah, I think we need to get to the essence of it, because the form that we have in the reflection, it's a perverted, distorted reflection. And so, okay, so for example, all right, so the idea of murder, okay, so the idea of anger, there is spiritual anger, there's spiritual anger. Okay, so like Hanuman, right? He got angry on behalf of Lord Ramachandra, and he set the city of Lanka on fire. When Arjuna grasped Bhagavad Gita, he got angry and fought with anger and fierceness. Krishna, yeah. So there's material anger, and so Krishna is the source of anger. Krishna is the source of anger, and so Krishna kills demons to protect his devotees. Like that. If someone is trying to interfere with devotional service, if someone's trying maliciously to interfere with the Vaikuntha program, because this is the residents of Vaikuntha, their joyful desires to bring everyone to Krishna, And so if someone's trying to maliciously interfere, that's inappropriate. So there's a just say material is I'm angry on behalf of my own material ego. So that's material anger. But anger on behalf of devotional service, anger to protect the devotees, anger to protect devotional service to Krishna, then that's spiritual anger. That's spiritual anger. So everything has its, I'll call it counter whole, because the spiritual, that's the wholeness of it. Everything has its counter whole. What the counter whole looks like, that I don't, I don't have realization of what spiritual blue is. But so there's naughty children here materially. So then Krishna has urinating pastimes, right? As a cute child. So so everything there exists in its pure form. There's spiritual competition. Spiritual competition, it's not trying to pull anyone else down or drag anyone else down, but it's kind of like, oh, you're serving Krishna better than me. I'm going to increase my service to Krishna. I'm going to increase my service. So there's spiritual competition.
Following up on that question from Eze, we often describe the material context.
Yes.
Like there is, like the misery from living on TTs. We have birth, death, old age, disease. We have like 4 different set of material context description. So by definition, it's a material context, so it's not something we find in the spiritual world. But then in the spiritual world, there's a spiritual context. So how the spiritual context, how the material context is a reflection, a perverted reflection of the spiritual context from that angle of vision.
Yeah. Well, the source of the material context is spirit. The source of the material context is spirit. Yes. And so, so just like everything in the shadow exists in the substance. And in the substance, it's defined and it's real. It's defined and it's real. Yeah, so there's spiritual anger, there's spiritual envy, there's spiritual greed, right? Rupa Goswami says the ticket to get to Vaikuntha is intense greed, that clear intention. Yes, I want more and more devotional service. Because in Vaikuntha, in these spiritual planets, these places without anxiety, there's nothing to do there except serve Krishna. And so to the extent that we experience that, I want more service, and then there's no room for anything non-devotional service, then we're living in Vaikuntha. So we're encouraged to develop spiritual greed, spiritual envy, which in a sense is like admiration of those who are serving bigger than me. So the source of the material context is spirit. So that's why Prabhupada makes the point right in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita. Prakriti is not false. It's a real energy of Krishna. It comes from spirit. And to the extent that we develop a devotional mentality, then we see the material context as spiritual too. Its source is spiritual. To the extent that we're not in a devotional mentality, then it's material for us because it keeps us and drives us into illusion. But to the extent that the soul is only interested in devotional service, then the material context becomes spiritual too. It comes from Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie and Eze. And I see some chat. I'll read the chat. Okay, let me see. All right, so Ramachandra wrote, I experience the path of bhakti as simple, which is grounding. However, many times I find it difficult to find a process in the classic bhakti approach to deal particular material obstacles which appear to me complicated. I was wondering, what are your thoughts about approaching other paths that offer specific practices to deal with material obstacles, paths which have a more impersonal approach or goal, Buddhism, Kundalini Yoga, Zen, etc. Yeah, so that's why we developed Safatov. Okay. And Damayanti writes, I have a question. Does Jesus encourage his followers to return to Vaikuntha Loka, Yahweh's planet, or Yeshua's planet, or a heavenly planet? How did followers of Jesus switch from focus on kingdom of God to heaven? Or how did they confuse the two? Thanks for your thoughts, if you have any insight. Yeah, so as far as going to other paths, well, that's the thing. If we have the realization to realize bhakti and other paths, then we can go there and we get bhakti yoga value, and we get bhakti yoga value. That's the principle of yukta vairagya, engaging everything in bhakti yoga and Krishna's service. And if we don't have the realization, then we'll get bewildered without knowing. We'll get bewildered by nothingness, void philosophy. We'll get bewildered by new age la-di-da stuff, and we'll think it's spiritual, like that. So that's the thing. So it's about knowing, what's the strength of my realization. So like Prabhupada could come to New York City, so many paths in New York City, and he spiritualized it. So yeah. So, we can go here and there. To what extent are we able to realize Krishna wherever we go? If not, then we're subject to get degraded. So that's about honesty with self. Malini?
At the beginning of the purport to this, Srila Prabhupada emphasized how Brahma just sat down, and it's devotion. So, like, I'm a little hesitant to embrace that perspective that something is missing in the process of bhakti, because even here, like, okay, Brahma sit down with himself, and Prabhupada said the process of bhakti can be so simple, and we can also just sit down with ourselves, and that the consciousness behind it is what makes a difference. So in a sense, all so-called obstacles or all so-called complexity of the material energy, have a way to be taken care of within the consciousness of the bhakti process.
Thanks for that, Malini. Yeah, thanks for that very much. If we think there's something incomplete or missing in the process of bhakti, it means we have a narrow-minded conception. It means we're in my. It probably means that I want something other than bhakti, and so okay, we can go for that. But and again, I started my response. That's why we developed Safatov. The idea of Safatov isn't like, look, we can go outside of bhakti and use psychology and transformational processes. Even though it's not bhakti, we can use it for Krishna consciousness. No, it's not my conception. It's not Prabhupada's conception. It's that everything in all these fields, psychology, social science, counseling, coaching, transformational leadership training, everything in all this field, anything that's valid finds its completion and perfection and most effective utilization and origin and source in the Bhagavatam. So if we're able to go, whether it's in the field of science or in the field of personal growth, we're able to go there and conceptually and experientially demonstrate that anything that's valid here finds its source in bhakti, then that's wonderful. That's glorious. That's what the acharyas want us to do in every field: law, medicine, personal growth, coaching. And again, But if we don't have enough realization, then we can go and we get bewildered by the material energy. It takes us away from bhakti. I appreciate your question, Ramachandra, and your statement. And Damayanti, like, I'm as you know, I'm no scholar in Christianity, but your question for me very much relates to what I was getting to, because my idea in Christianity, they have some idea of heavenly kingdom. There's what comes down in the name of Jesus, what Jesus actually said. Did Jesus make a distinction between heaven and Vaikuntha? Maybe, maybe not. And if he didn't, for me, there's no contradiction there, because he was meeting people where they're at and encouraging them to advance and for them to live a good religious dharmic life and then go to heaven when you die. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And maybe that's what they were ready for. Maybe Jesus does give some glimpses of the spiritual world. Nice. And then it's not a fraction of what's there in Bhagavatam. Again, there's like the pocket dictionary, and then there's the unabridged dictionary. Thank you, Damayanti.
I remember maybe it was one of our reading on Christmas or something like that, reading something where Christ, he doesn't directly speak about the heavenly planet or the kingdom of God. However, he decries the consciousness, because it's not a place, it's really a consciousness. And I remember you and I reading something where Christ really if you want to go to God to have more money, or if you want to go to God to have a better life or a better situation in life or a better relationship. So he was not really speaking about the heavenly planet, but he was describing the desire for the heavenly planet and decrying it.
Yeah.
Comparing it to the desire for God, which is to please God and do what God wants and satisfy God. So in that way, there is a distinction in I'm not a scholar either, I don't know the Bible so well, but I remember reading in that way.
Definitely 100%. So Jesus gives the path of pure devotional service, as Damayanti indicates in what you had, a lot of what goes on in the name of Jesus becomes in joy in heaven, like that. But Jesus gives the path of devotional service. Jesus gives pure bhakti. That is the Vaikuntha path, definitely. Len Cohen.
Yeah, thank you, David. Really enjoyed the class today. What came to my mind was something from my childhood. It's not a question, just sort of an analogy that about this world that we live in, how everything's kind of a shadow and doesn't really have the substance. But I remember the old DC comic book Superman. So in Superman, there was a bizarro world. I think there was a bizarro world, right? Where everything was kind of backwards. You had an anti-Superman. You had the clocks running backwards. You had trains going backwards. So I was just reminded of that when you're talking about how what we're experiencing here in the material world is just a shadow of what the original form is. So we're not really aware of it 100% of the time, but yeah. So we're all living in a bizarro world, only we don't really have full cognition about it, but it is temporary. It's not, it doesn't have the real substance. And yeah, everything's kind of backwards and the opposite of what it could be on the Vaikuntha planet. So I'll just throw that analogy there, Superman out there. If any of you remember that comic book, The Bizarro World. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Len. Thank you, that Bizarro World from Superman comment. Well, it reminds me, because Srila Prabhupada's first book Srila Prabhupada's first book is Easy Journey to Other Planets. And he kind of does that sort of analogy because at that time, the scientists were discovering, they were calling it antimatter. So Prabhupada took that and ran with it. He goes, yes, there's matter. And then there's a whole universe of matter. And we're experiencing that. And there's a whole universe of antimatter with opposite properties. Everything here is temporary. Everything there is eternal. Everything here is a source of misery. We can think like even any square millimeter on our body can be the source of so much pain. Spiritual, everything's made of chintamani atoms, which is the source of unlimited bliss, unlimited joy. Here, everything's ignorant, right? I mean, there's consciousness because the spiritual atom is within the bodies, but matter means ignorant, spiritual, cognizant, conscious, consciousness. And here everything's impersonal. And there everything is personal. Every atom is personal. The substratum of everything is Vasudeva. So Prabhupada talks, it's the same bizarro world idea. Prabhupada talks about Vaikuntha planets. It's antimatter. He uses that term. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Anandini.
Yes, it's a comment and a question. It's a mixture. I was, while you were speaking and reading the verse and the purport, I was thinking about these two aspects of spiritual growth or bhakti yoga, like the watering the flowers and pulling the weeds, and that like pulling the weeds, I was thinking about that because of these 5 miseries that covers the soul, and one of them here, which is it's the first time I notice, one of them is hatred. Like that's a misery that's covering the soul. And I was thinking that it's actually quite easy to just stay with looking at all the misery, or at least for me, it's although I don't like it, and although I wish there weren't any misery, still I'm very attached to it. And then it doesn't make sense because I don't want the misery, but then it's so comfortable. It's so like it gives me a sense of, oh yeah, like I know this, it's familiar. And the watering the flower part, to really, like you were saying, the Srimad Bhagavatam and Brahma Samhita, they give like an insight into the spiritual world, and that world is like when I'm really honest, I feel attracted to it, and at the same time really scared.
Scared.
Yeah, like what? Because it's not possible for me to imagine a place without the body. How will I know I exist? Because that's all right now. That's all I know.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. These 5 types of ignorance, it's not discussed much, but there are some other places. I think 3rd canto, Brahma created the 5 types of ignorance, 5 types of illusion. And so it's not something Prabhupada talks about too much, but sometimes. And then hearing you, Anandini, I'm reminded of Prabhupada's purport to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 10. And Prabhupada talks about fear of spiritual existence. Like, oh, this is what I know. And then if I give this up, then there's nothing. So it's like, it's kind of a common psychology that becomes a sort of obstacle on the path of devotion. Fear of that unknown spiritual existence. And so you're attracted to descriptions of Vaikuntha and Goloka Vrindavan, and also there's fear there.
Yeah, it's like it's this paradox on both sides. It's a paradox.
Yeah.
Like not wanting the misery, but feeling like attached to it, and wanting the Vaikuntha, the no misery place, but being scared of it.
Yeah. And that's it, like that. And then like as we associate, like we associate with Srila Prabhupada, we associate with others, or practicing, we should associate with these personalities in the Bhagavatam, who there's no fear there. There's full trust, full realization. And it's described, this path of bhakti, 9 steps, starting with some trust, some basic respect for the path. At al shraddha, tata sadhu, sangato, bhajana kriya, tato nartani vritisha, tato nishta rujistata. And that, so that pulling the weeds, the anarta nivriti, getting rid of unwanted stuff, unwanted behaviors, unwanted laziness, and then gradually our trust in the process, our trust in the reality that's revealed in Bhagavatam is enhanced, and more we trust this reality than the reality of our own mind and senses and material conditioning. And what you're saying, I think it goes to the core of the psychology of my material ego, that, okay, like, even though the material is it's misery, there's so much misery, but I'm comfortable, right? We're comfortable in this misery. And if I fully trusted in these descriptions of Vaikuntha, then I'd be a fully surrendered soul. But I must have some resistance, some fear of it, and some attachment to the material forms, attachment to even though they're sources of misery.
And the question I have is, like, there is one verse in the 4th canto where it says, like, sitting together and reading Srimad Bhagavatam and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, it creates a place where everyone forgets their misery. I don't know which verse it is, but everyone forgets their misery. They even forget to be envious with each other. And so that's my understanding of Vaikuntha, or spiritual consciousness. So is listening to Srimad Bhagavatam, is that a kind of a training for our system, like our whole system, to get accustomed to being aware that we're alive without the misery?
Yeah, definitely. I remember that verse. I mean, I don't know exactly where in the 4th canto. The answer is yes. This whole thing, morning program, chanting, the whole Bhakti Yoga program given us a Prabhupada, it's a training. It's training us for Vaikuntha. It's so beautiful. It's a wonderful, joyful training. In Vaikuntha, there's nothing to do except to joyfully serve Krishna in the association of other pure souls. And so this is a training. And then there's no anxiety. So this is a training for that. This Bhagavatam class in the morning, exactly. That's nicely put. By giving ourselves to this process, by doing this austerity, because there's other easier things we could be doing, like sleeping late. Of course, I understand for you it's mid-afternoon. And this is a training. This is a training to enter into Vaikuntha. It's a training to enter into Goloka Vrindavan, and for ourselves, and like the mood of the gopis, the mood of the cowherd boys, the mood of the residents of Vaikuntha is to bring everyone into this blissful devotional service. So that's part of the training too, having programs, distributing Prabhupada's books, sincerely desiring the highest welfare for others, para upakara. That's the Vaikuntha mood. So this is all a training, so that when this body's finished, whether it's tomorrow or in 80 years, when this body's finished, we just keep doing what we were trained to do. That we use our lifetime in this body to do the Vaikuntha program. And when this body's finished, it's just like, okay, I'm talking to you from here. Okay, now I'm talking to you from here. Right? So that's death for the Vaikuntha soul. That okay, the body's finished. Now I keep serving Vasudeva. I keep serving Sri Krishna, Instead of doing it from this David Wolf body, I do it. So exactly, but Prabhupada gave us a full training program. Thank you, Andy. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Garuda.
Hare Krishna. So yeah, I appreciate your class today. Thank you for leading. And kind of what we were just speaking about, I was just thinking about like being in the spiritual world, or originally from the spiritual world.
Yeah.
And then we have a desire to not serve Krishna with all our time and energy. We want to do something else. So we end up here, and then, you know, thinking about like this training process to like awaken our original our original state of serving Krishna, and thinking about like that process, like not just like training to become that, but like a training process to like revitalize that. That's kind of the sense that I'm getting, and that
I like that word. It's so accurate.
Well, that's how I'm trying to like really solidify it for myself by speaking it out loud, because I'm like, okay, like this isn't like, you know, I'm trying to do something I've never been before. I'm like trying to revitalize who I really am, or the state of being that I really.
That's what Prabhupada says. The Hare Krishna mantra, the whole process of bhakti, it's nothing artificial. It's nothing to be gained from an external source. It's the original consciousness of the soul, and that's encouraging for you.
Because it feels like, well, you know, if I was that before, then there's a chance that I could return to that again, you know. So it feels less intimidating, I guess. At the same time, I'm feeling like, wow, I feel so far away from that. Like, I'm appreciating just being here this morning. I'm in my life. You know, I have a morning program. I'm chanting my rounds every day, and yet, like, I feel like I'm, you know, being tossed by the waves of material life, and I feel this process of just like association. I think maybe that's a big part of it. Is like helping me to like, okay, like step out of my, like, you know, my boat being tossed around, and like, oh, there's a big picture here, and this is what it looks like getting a clearer picture of, like, you know, just a better perspective, I guess, is kind of what I'm appreciating. Getting out of my material family life drama, and
You're appreciating these few hours of association.
Because I have this desire to, you know, it's like we're all seeking Vaikuntha, and you know, I feel like my life has been a pursuit of seeking Vaikuntha in different, some way, shape, or form.
In different ways,
So and then, you know, coming to family life, like, you know, seeking some sort of Vaikuntha there, like, oh, like, you know, being single when I was younger, and then coming to family life, and then coming into this bhakti yoga process, and seeing a whole new like direction with Vaikuntha, like seeking that Vaikuntha experience. And still, like in family life, I'm like, well, how do I cultivate Vaikuntha from, you know, my family? Like, I think I kind of can get lost a little bit materially, like thinking about it.
Get lost in the material drama.
Yeah, or just creating Vaikuntha materially, and like, you know, just
there is no Vaikuntha materially.
No, it doesn't seem that way. You know, and I mean, yeah. So yeah, and then we've been moving out of town, moving a little bit outside of town to, try to create a little bit more like Sattvic, maybe some Vaikuntha like desire there, and then there's disturbances, it's right away we're seeing, oh, this is a disturbance that we didn't have in town. It's a disturbance outside of town. So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like looking at that and like, but I think mostly like appreciating like just this like, this idea that I'm like, revitalizing like a state of being that who I really am is like, I'm really like, okay, like, yeah, like, if my true state of being is serving Krishna in the spiritual world, then like, it kind of seems like the only thing to do right now is to serve Krishna and serve Srila Prabhupada in that process, like, and yeah, it's just like, it seems so simple, like sitting here with this like paradigm, it's like, it seems so simple. And yet like, it's challenging too, just to not go right back into like, oh, material consciousness, like as soon as I walk out the door. Yeah, so
Simple does not mean easy.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, mostly I'm appreciating the association of being here and this what you are taking a stand for, and what yeah, I'm appreciating that.
I appreciate your sharing. Thank you, Dhira Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Yeah, and that's the idea that oftentimes trying to address the material context for more of a Vaikuntha experience, it's like there was this big burden on my shoulder and it's gone. But now it's on the other shoulder, or now I feel it on my neck. It's like, yeah, maybe we do alleviate some disturbances, but then there's other disturbances from just other forms of disturbances. That's, the material context, we divide it into 16 items, borrowing from Prabhupada's teachings: birth, death, old age, disease, disturbances from our own mind and body, disturbances from other people, disturbances from pandemics, from disturbances related to the cheating propensity, to limitations, disturbances related to birth, death, old age, disease, the pillar problems. So the idea is like to let that experience move me to give up on trying to create Vaikuntha in the material context, and let me give myself to revitalize my eternal nature. One final comment comes to me on the training point. Thanks for this quote, Anandini. Whenever pure topics of the transcendental world are discussed, the members of the audience forget all kinds of material hankerings, at least for the time being. Not only that, but they are no longer envious of one another, nor do they suffer from anxiety or fear. Beautiful. Right there from towards the end of the 4th canto. Yeah, so that's the Vaikuntha atmosphere. I know we're creating that in these Bhagavatam discussions. And then, as Guru indicated, and then our challenge is to live there steadily all day, every day. And the pure devotee, even in this material world, there's no material world for the pure devotee. They're in devotional service, they're in Vaikuntha consciousness, as Malini indicated. Essentially, it's a consciousness. Yes, also it's a geography. Essentially, it's a consciousness. There are places, and I'm thinking Chaitanya Charitamrita, maybe a Krishna book, related to the training principle, where Prabhupada says, for the most part, it doesn't need to be absolute, but even if someone is really sincere in performing devotional service, taking the training seriously, they don't go to Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan after the death of this body. The general process is one will take birth in a planet, in a material universe where Krishna is performing his pastimes. and there'll be an associate in Goloka Vrindavan for some final training, for like some final finishing school. Yeah, and it's probably, so that's generally the process. That, yeah, generally, you know, there's going to be a few rough edges, even if we're sincere. So we'll take birth, which is a wonderful birth, in a material planet, in the material universe, where Krishna is enacting his Vrindavan pastimes, and then we maybe will, yeah, then we'll serve under residents of Vrindavan for some final training before fully back home, back to Goloka Vrindavan. That's the general path.
Yeah, I want to say something about that also. Like, you really depend on our desire, because you will also be trained in Prabhupada's pastime, and be an associate of Prabhupada, or go in Navadvip somewhere and be with Lord Chaitanya, and it's just, you know, or maybe like it's a progression like that also.
Thanks for that. Yeah, definitely true. And Damayanti.
She answered my question.
Okay. Yeah. So it's the general principle. Yeah, someone might develop a service to Nrsingadev, a service to Ramachandra. Nrsingadev has his planets and like that. Okay, and we have a chat from Brielle. Brielle writes, if we're trying to get away from material disturbances, that is for our joy pain. The pure devotee is happy to serve wherever the spiritual master wants him to serve, even if it's in hell or a hellish place. Real transcendence is devotional service with the body, personality, assigned place we were given. Beautiful. Thank you for that, Brielle. That's completely bhakti in the mood of Prabhupada. Prabhupada often quotes this verse from Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva said, Narayana prav sarve nat kashchana bibyati svarga pavarga up narakesh bhakti tulyarta darshina. So Parvati cursed Chitraketu. She was angry with him because he was sort of making fun of her and Shiva. They were in some sort of a romantic pastime, and he was sort of laughing at them. So she cursed him. She didn't like it. And then Chitraketu, so she cursed him to have some hellish existence. So Chitraketu he got down from his airplane and he oh, thank you, mother. Thank you. This is a blessing. And then Shiva and Parvati were like, wow. So Shiva was like, well, you just cursed him to like some hellish existence. Just look at the devotees. They could be in heaven or hell as long as they get to serve. That's their bliss. Thank you for that, Brielle.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
I just thought of a scenario, like what if there's a practicing, bhakti yogi and following Srila Prabhupada, and they're like really good at sharing Krishna consciousness and distributing books and gaining followers. Like, I don't know, do they need to go back to Vaikuntha, or maybe like after they leave that body, they're just like taken up by the Lord Chaitanya and Prabhupada, and they kept in the material world to continue their service? Would that happen? Is that like a possible scenario?
Yeah, I don't know if I know, I'm completely clear on what you're asking, but as Molly said, it's about what's their consciousness, what's in their heart. Also, like, okay, so like Prabhupada served in the material world, but like when Prabhupada's on the Jaladuta, or when Prabhupada's dancing at San Francisco Rath Yatra, it's not that he's not in Goloka Vrindavan. So just as Krishna has an inconceivable body, so do the pure devotees. So it's not like, are they here or there? It's not like that. Even within this realm, the pure Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta, they're fully present, 100%, no minimization in their picture. Okay, so that means in your home, in my home, and Bhakti Yoga Ashram, and they're in Switzerland, right? So we can't do that because we're materially conditioned. So it's not like, are they here or are they there? For the pure devotee. So that's an important principle. And Prabhupada describes that. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.